Thanks, Dr. Bauman. And let me ask our audience, how many of you knew what the word trichologist meant? Be sure to use that in a conversation this week coming up. And remember to give your scalp some love. Okay, now on to another medical expert that is consulting with Amrit Ocean Resort on Singer Island, Florida, Dr. Kevin Chapman. It is fitting that the last special presenter of this amazing, never done before, 24-hour online live cast of Global Wellness Day would be a clinical psychologist specializing in treating anxiety. Dr. Chapman has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg Business, Men's Health, on A&E TV, The Today Show. He treats prisoners who are being released back into society, also professional athletes who are anxious before a game, and of course, people who are anxious about COVID and even the intricacies of race relations today. Listen for the following: the biggest mistakes people make in dealing with their own anxiety. What's the difference between how men and women deal with anxiety? And also, what if we're anxious about saying or doing the wrong thing to someone of a different race? Listen also for what the word fight stands for and how it's a very positive thing in dealing with anxiety. Join me as I speak with Dr. Chapman. Happy Global Wellness Day. Here we are from Amrit Ocean Resort and Residences interviewing their mental wellness and anxiety advisor, Dr. Kevin Chapman, a clinical psychologist. Dr. Chapman, tell us where you are and what your specialty is.
I am in Louisville, Kentucky, and I said it correctly, Louisville, Kentucky. My specialty is anxiety-related symptoms. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and I work with fear and anxiety-based disorders.
Now, why would we worry about anxiety in a time like COVID? Why?
Well, anxiety is linked to uncertainty, and anxiety is a normal, healthy, adaptive response that's related to future events. So anxiety involves this idea that if I can't control or predict a future outcome, then I'm going to be anxious about it. So anxiety is really trying to prepare me to cope with uncertainty. Well, if you're talking about COVID-19, you're talking about reopening society. Certainly uncertainty is present right now for everybody. So anxiety is actually a good thing. It's just a matter of how we respond to it and that we're listening to it and allow it to effectively change our behavior in a very adaptive way.
I read on your website, what is the mistake most people make with their anxiety?
Most people judge their anxiety, honestly, Kim, and I think that when they get anxious, they push it away. So there's a paradox though. When I get anxious or if I get angry or if I get fearful, I might do something to make myself feel better. But when I try to push my anxiety away, like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, or oh, this is too uncomfortable, what happens is I might get an initial sense of relief, but that backfires and makes the anxiety worse. So the biggest issue is when we avoid anxiety, we try to push anxiety away, we try to suppress it, we worry about it because it makes us lose sight of what the anxiety is actually intended to help us with.
Wow. And also, if people try to cover it over with alcohol or drugs or something like that, it gets more and more problematic. Well, one thing I also noticed on your interviews is that you, as they say, honor people's feelings. You've dealt with prisoners about ready to be released back into society. You've dealt with people from abusive homes, but you really sound like you honor their feelings. Why is it that you tell people to feel their feelings?
Well, I think the main reason is because we all have emotions and they're all adaptive at the core. I think the issue is that many emotional experiences have a bad rep because we don't understand emotions. So what I try to do, Kim, is to bring emotions to the forefront and recognize that it's not the emotion itself that's an issue. It's the way we try to manage and regulate emotions that are the problem. And if we can teach people that things like anxiety, fear, disgust, sadness, anger, those are all adaptive emotions that serve a purpose. They're all trying to help us survive by navigating our world successfully. And where people go wrong is they learn to view certain emotions as threatening. So they do things to try to push those emotions away that backfire and make them experience more of the emotions. So if we can get people in touch with their emotions to navigate emotions, recognizing that emotions run a natural course, they ebb and flow like waves, right? If we can do that, then we realize that things like worry, avoidance, using alcohol and drugs to feel better. All of those things are unnecessary at that point.
I noticed you did say ride the wave. I also noticed that you work a lot with athletes, and we honored Kevin Love, the basketball player, who's honest about his struggle with mental wellness and has a foundation. How do men handle anxiety differently than women?
You know, oftentimes the way that we're socialized based on gender expectations historically and such is that men are often socialized to not show emotions, right? And in many ways, men have unfortunately been socialized to push emotions away and suppress the very thing I just talked about that backfires. So ultimately, you see anxiety manifest in men in a number of different ways. Anger is often a manifestation of men. Isolation is often a manifestation of anxiety in men because, ironically, Kim, if you think about those emotions I just named, anxiety, fear, anger, etc., those emotions feel the same physiologically in our body. And the way we interpret that arousal in our body will dictate what emotions we often experience. So in many ways, if my heart's beating fast, well, that happens with anger, that happens with anxiety, that happens with fear. Does that mean I'm one or the other? Well, it depends on the context. So oftentimes, men can be aggressive or manifest aggression as a result of being anxious because it's the socially appropriate thing that we've been conditioned to do.
And also, I think a lot of men and some women are embarrassed to be anxious, right? They
Absolutely.
think they should be able to handle it better. I also think we should address, besides the pandemic, people are afraid to go out again, touch things, sleepless nights, also the racial unrest in the US and it's spilling over to other countries. People are anxious about doing and saying the wrong thing to the person of a different race. What advice would you have for that, Dr. Chapman?
Well, I think that in this time right now, people of color, in particular African Americans, one thing that we tend to agree with right now during this time is that, you know, first of all, having the majority culture people, white allies, is very, very, very important and essential. I mean, in many ways, it's important to recognize that we want to be heard. We want people to say, you know, how are you doing? Checking in, letting us know that you're actually paying attention to it and actually doing things to help the community and show that you're actually supporting by action, not just talking about it, not just having some nice post on Facebook, but actually engaging in the community, standing side by side with people of color and saying, you know what, we're in this with you. This is our fight, not your fight. And it's something that's very important for all of us as a society to do together and unify.
Yeah, to believe that we're all in it together, just like the pandemic, to believe that.
Absolutely.
Also, now, before we go, I don't want to not have the audience understand your acronym for dealing with anxiety. Teach it to us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have an acronym that we call FIGHT, and the letters stand for something, and it could be fight COVID, it could be fight this difficult situation, fight this anxiety, whatever it might be. But it's very useful for pretty much any situation, especially as we think about COVID, think about the pandemic, think about all the things that are going on in our society right now. The F stands for focus on what you can control. Present focused awareness is so incredibly important because I can only control what's happening to me right now, my behavior, my emotional response, what's happening in this present moment in time and space, not other people's behavior, my own. So focus on what I specifically, individually, can control. The I is to identify negative thoughts. Negative thoughts fuel the fire to strong emotions, period, whether it be anxiety, fear, anger, disgust, sadness. And when I identify what those thoughts are, that's going to lead to my arousal in my body, Kim, and then lead to my behavioral response. The G is generate alternative thoughts. And generate alternative, flexible thoughts is key. Flexible thoughts, not positive, flexible. Generating different thoughts is key to regulating emotions. The H is highlighting adaptive behaviors. How can I help my community? How can I help someone in need? How can I do something to help myself? Exercise, walk around the block, etc. And then finally, the T is to teach someone else the same thing, kind of a discipleship mentality. How can I help someone else do the exact same thing?
Well, Dr. Chapman, you've helped us today. We can't thank you enough. Happy Global Wellness Day, happy Mental Wellness Day, and we look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.